Welcome to Famous When I'm Dead, a podcast where artists share the story of how they thrive while they're still alive. I'm your host, Sam King Davis. You can find us on Instagram at Famous When I'm Dead. That's famous_when_I'm_dead. And if you want to contact me directly, you can do that on famouswhenimdead at kingdavisart.com. You can find those along with all other show notes in the description below. Today we have a very special episode. This is the first installment in a new series on professional artists who have ADHD. We talk about how they convert this diagnosis into their superpower. I put that in all caps so I'd remember to be enthusiastic. Although I've known most of my life that I've had ADHD, I was recently professionally diagnosed and have focused on treating it and converting it into a strength. So genuinely, really, I'm honored and excited to announce my next guest. He is an illustrator who has worked with clients like the New York Times, Apple, and Nickelodeon. He's also the co-founder of CoLoop, which helps artists work together and thrive in business. He also hosts his own awesome podcast, Creative Pep-Talk. Just listened to the first one today. It was awesome, genuinely. And probably like 5 other things that I missed. So I introduce you to Andy J. Pizza.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here.
Awesome.
And by the way, I love the name of your podcast and your tagline. This is the thing I think a lot about, like the idea of, I really believe that good things spread on their own, but they often spread really slow, especially really good things. There are things that are, kind of great, but not super deep that go viral. A lot of that stuff. It's rare that something with a lot of nuance and depth goes viral.
Yeah, bingo.
But the stuff that is really fantastic, it does spread, but it spreads so slow that if you don't help it along, you'll probably be dead by the time it catches on. And that's my excuse for marketing. That's why I say, artist, you need to, if you're a coffee shop, sure. People will tell you got to go to that coffee shop. It's so good. But if you wait for that to be your only way to get people through the door, you're not going to have the budget. You're not going to have the savings to keep the lights on in time to stick around. And people will be like, oh man, you missed it. That coffee shop was amazing. Too bad it's gone. And so I love because I've said this before, is like, if you let word of mouth be the only thing that keeps your ship afloat, you're probably, if you're really great, you'll probably be fine, except that you're dead.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I love it. That's great.
Cool. Yeah. That gives a whole new purpose to it. Terrible things spread really quickly, actually. Not only the coronavirus, but really shitty opinions not opinions, but like really inflammatory stuff. And we know that's the algorithms. My dog is literally eating my cactus right now. Come here.
That doesn't sound healthy. It's not advised. I love that. I never thought about that angle of how fast terrible news. I mean, obviously I've heard that, but I hadn't put it in the context of creativity. And it's just very interesting because, it's just an interesting side to that, because I do think that creative people would love to believe they really want. I think a lot of people, they're making art to find that affirmation, to find out whether they're okay or not. And when they put something online and it doesn't go viral, they take that as, yeah, you're just as crappy as you thought you were. But the truth is, going viral is a very specific type of value. It's and if you go study it, which I have, I've watched, videos, I've watched classes, I've dug into case studies of why do things go viral. And then after you do that, you have to decide, is that the kind of stuff that you want to make? By the way, some things that go viral are fantastic. I have a buddy of mine who almost everything he makes goes viral, but the type of work that he makes, he really trades in kind of surprise and delight. That stuff works really well in terms of virality. But the stuff that I want to make is often just a little bit slower than that, maybe a little bit more nuanced in terms of value. It's a little bit more vague, and that's okay. I think that's totally fine.
We're gonna keep him here and join us.
What did you say his name was?
Django.
Django. Hey, Django.
Yeah, I mean that's actually something that I have an issue with the podcast and posting it on YouTube. So I'm gonna definitely move over to the podcasting space because, man, I mean, I watched that talk with I forget his last name, Tristan something, the guy who made The Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did an interview on Joe Rogan, and man, I mean, he just described the way the algorithm basically tilts toward crazy. So it's like anything, like you said, anything that has nuance and really like in-depth kind of meaningful stuff. And I did kind of a split test with that actually on my Facebook page. I put the image of the guy, be in the Capitol building with the Viking horns. And I put goodbye 2020, hello 2021.
Yeah.
And it got 80 comments. And then I put a nice post about something like some real loving kind of post about how we should stay unified. And I think 2 people liked it. They didn't even get a comment.
And you know what? Here's another interesting thing, because what I am all about is I don't want artists. The easy thing to do with that is to, not just artists, but people, is to be dualistic and binary in the way that you think about those things. Therefore, you think viral bad, nuanced good. And I don't think that that's actually very helpful. By the way, I mentioned this, but my buddy who makes tons of viral stuff, his work is phenomenal. But I think that you can be really intentional about that and realize that there's a kind of a journey that your audience can go on. If you know how to make stuff that just results in awareness, where people are just becoming aware of you, you can do that with stuff that's not very nuanced and maybe just really fun or whatever, designed for virality. And then you can get them into your ecosystem and get them, and this is what my buddy does. And as they become more and more true fans of what you do, you can introduce them to the stuff that's a little more challenging or takes more attention, costs something more of them. And those people are actually who you can actually build a career on, that kind of fandom. So I'm very slow to categorize those things as good or bad. I just think being aware of them is really key, and being self-aware of what your strengths are and what your goals are in terms of how you want to connect with the world,
But yeah, man, that's definitely an interesting strategy. I never quite thought about that before. So he gets he makes viral videos or viral posts, or
yeah, his name's Kyle Sheely. He actually, over the past decade, he's made a lot of videos that have gone viral in different ways. Most recently, he did a TikTok that went mega viral. He went from just starting on TikTok at 17 followers all the way to 1.5 million in a week. And the truth is, the video that went viral is brilliant. It's hilarious. I absolutely love it. I wouldn't call it deep, but he's capable of doing both. And so, the part 2 of the video, which maybe didn't go viral, but a lot of people that saw the first video saw it, had a lot of heart and a lot of nuance. And so he's really good with the 1-2 sucker punch. And I've learned a ton from him from that.
Wow.
But yeah,
what's his thing? What does he do?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, what does he do? He's an artist, but it's almost like, I don't know if I'd call it performance art. He's a public speaker primarily for his job. But what he does are these internet projects, and there's all kinds of different ones. One of his projects is this marathon that he hosted, and it was called Free Run because it was free from running. It's a fake marathon. So you sign up and you get like the bib and the medals and all that stuff. And there's hashtags and everybody's taking photos of themselves pretending to run.
Like
and
spray yourself with sweat.
Yeah. I think he did do that. And so just like internet projects like that, he just does these things. But I think he's such a good model for people that can do that because he doesn't stop there. He almost always uses that to then go on to say something deeper or create some beautiful moment or, whatever. So, I've learned a ton from his approach to, what is really shareable and then what gets the width in terms of the internet and then what gets the depth in terms of the connection with somebody.
So he goes wide and then he goes deep.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. That's it.
What's his name? I'll put it in the show notes.
It's Kyle Scheele, which is Scheele.
And people can find him on Instagram.
Yeah, he's on Instagram. He's on TikTok. He's all over the place. Twitter.
Scheele.
Scheele. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. So why don't we just kind of do a quick overview of your journey when you were diagnosed and like kind of like your upbringing into art. I remember some of the stuff from another podcast I listened to, but for the people who haven't heard it.
Yeah, I would love to talk about it. It's one of my favorite subjects is neuro-diversity and ADHD and all that stuff. I was one of the folks who was only diagnosed as an adult. How
old were you?
I probably was like 25, something like that. I had suspected that I was ADHD in high school, but I grew up in Indiana, in the Midwest in America. And I think especially then, which would have been like the early 2000s, we were still in a time where I think, we're in the Bible Belt, overly religious, and just kind of a stigma about mental health. But on top of that, just kind of like, my mom, my mom's never been diagnosed, my real mom. And I didn't grow up around her. I've talked openly about this on the internet a lot. She kind of split the scene early on. And I highly suspect that she has ADHD. And, watching her life was a lesson in what it looks like for people not to understand mental health or have a diagnosis and just use the word. If they don't have the words and they don't have that framework, they're going to reach for the words that they have. And the words that they have are lazy and chaotic and, whatever. And I think that, looking back, I could just see how it's so easy. All the cliches of, you're not trying hard enough. Well, they don't understand. They don't have the knowledge to know that actually that's a weak executive function. Mm-hmm. And there's two ways to get around that. And neither of them are just do it. Sorry, Nike. It's not working for ADHD people. Yeah. Like there's two ways. There's one, medicine, or you find different coping mechanisms that allow you to either get to the other side, minimize those activities, or make them obsolete by delegating them. Like there is for ADHD, I'll tell you right now, here's an interesting little, I hope this maybe makes sense. One of my favorite one of the things I'm going through right now that I feel like perfectly illustrates the weak executive function of ADHD, which, by the way, if you're not familiar, the way I heard it explained that I feel very seen in is this idea that the parent part of your brain isn't in charge. They don't call the shots. The kid's in charge. You have to incentivize and get around the kid. You have to trick them into it. There's no just doing something. So
that's a really good example. Yeah.
100%. Dude, that's so true. And that's my favorite way to explain probably the biggest challenge around ADHD. Right now, I have a MacBook that's broken. Okay. I've paid Apple $700 to fix it. They sent me a box. That box has been in my room for over a month, and I haven't sent the MacBook to them. Why? Because I cannot force myself to do it. I just can't. I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I paid for that. And I have to think, and this has been my whole adulthood. How am I going to get myself to do that? And to someone who is normal, who is neurotypical, that is insane. Why don't you just send it? And I'm like, because I cannot force myself to do it if I don't want to do it. And so, it's literally feeling like I'm a little bit crazy, but that's my life. That is 100% my experience. So, anyway, so I didn't get diagnosed. There's a lot of stigma around that. I think that there was a lot of just, get over it, grow up. It's time to be an adult, blah, 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 blah. Then eventually, when I was an entrepreneur, I was already had my own illustration practice. And for the most part, I was leaning into all of my strengths. My method up to that point was just make everything that you have to do stuff that you want to do. Mm-hmm. And that's why I really pursued my dreams or whatever, is because I watched my mom try to fit in, try to be neurotypical, and just fail and fail and fail and fail. One of those failures was just try to be a stay-at-home mom. She tried that with 2 families that she abandoned. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that, just trying to stick it out and be normal was impossible for her, that's when I knew that's not going to be my plan. That plan is not going to work for me. And
I think the important thing I want to interject here is the intention deficit disorder. I think that's another good way to look at it, because it's frustrating for people, because when we say that we want to do something, we really do intend to do that, and it just doesn't happen, so I like what you said about the framework too, that people have, like, they don't have any kind of framework or context or language around it. So, I think it was like the 1800s or like the early 1900s, they would say, they would just call it a moral disorder.
100. I mean, honestly, when you go look through the symptoms of it, one way of looking at ADHD is what we would just call a bad person. It's not true. That's not how I actually feel. But the symptoms, that is how the culture would look at that. And it's so, and I think it's really confusing, because there's actually things about ADHD that I really believe they're very creative people, and they're often, their personality is usually kind of endearing. It's annoying probably sometimes, but also kind of like, oh, look at this guy. He's wild and weird and strange and unexpected and all that stuff. So I feel like there's a lot of conflict around it, because every person that ever met my mom probably initially was like, she's great. I love her. She's got tons of energy. She's funny. She's goofy, whatever. And then just over time, we're like, well, you can't depend on her. Yeah. Like, well, she's not going to text you back. She's not going to be there. She, all that kind of stuff.
Flaky.
Flaky, super flaky. And so I think, by the time I got diagnosed, that's kind of when the whole just make everything what you have to do, what you want to do. That's kind of where that hit a wall. And there was just too many things, like tax problems, taxes are just so painful for me. I've gotten better and better about how to
What do you do? How do you do them?
Well, there's a bunch of, that's a huge question. But I for the past 10 years, I've more or less just been on a mission to make taxes as painless as possible. Especially in America, tax is just a nightmare. I could go into all of the reasons why, including how the tax software companies literally lobby. This is a fact. This isn't a conspiracy. This is a fact. You can go read it in any publication. Go look on Washington Post or something. It's there. Like TurboTax lobbies the government to keep taxes complicated in this country so that they have a reason to exist, so that people need their software, right? Oh, taxes are insane in America. And then especially they're especially bad if you're self-employed, which includes me. And just over time, there's just a bunch of things, a lot of learning, like last year, my business got a little bit more complicated and I was back in a struggle with how to figure it out. I finally realized like I've been prideful for over a decade with this business. My dad is literally like a finance genius and I've never asked him to help me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so last year I asked him to kind of step in and help me out. But then also there's two other things that have made taxes easier and easier for me. One is I have an agent and now I make sure I used to, when I had an agent, take some work on the side that I would invoice for. And, that, it was all in the agreement. It wasn't like, off the radar of them, just like different things I would handle. Now I just have him handle every single thing so that all of my commissioned work comes with a 1099, one form that says, this is everything you made. He's essentially doing the books for that. So that's one part of it. I also got a more intense relationship with an accountant that has more experience in this particular area. So, there were all things learned over time, but when I was about, I don't know, something like 25, all of the stuff, that whole mentality of just try to make everything you have to do what you want to do got me so far. And then I hit a wall and I just was missing deadlines and struggling and stressed and all that.
So what happened? Like you graduated from high school and then you started a business right away, or did you go to college and then start like that?
So this is a massive lucky break for me where when I graduated high school and I was going into I was planning on going to college but I was very, I think I always had Peter Pan syndrome going through high school of like terrified of growing up. It was things like, how do people keep Band-Aids in their house? Like just the level of management of being an adult just frightened me. I was
so did you like the, I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that was me. And so as I'm about to go into college and I'm looking at college courses in America and I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this, man. My dad got transferred to the UK for a few years. And I had the opportunity to go to college over there. And there's two great things about that for me. One, it's their bachelor program is 3 years. And two, there's no general studies for their college. So I could go over there and study design and illustration and take no other classes.
Oh, nice.
All of the classes I took in college were things I wanted to do.
Yeah, one thing that was in what you said about your mom, I remember that story from the other podcast. And after I got diagnosed, I started thinking about my dad. And man, he was the like poster child for it. Like he was really brilliant and he would make these notes and these charts and like these spider charts and all these great ideas. And the one thing I wanted to mention about that was it popped into my head when you were talking about it, was that one time he took me into the other room and he has this box full of these, completely disorganized notes, and it takes him 15 minutes and he goes, here, look at this. And he pulls out this piece of paper and it's got a drawing and charted explanation of inline skates. And he's got a date written on there because he wanted to patent inline skates. And it was like 3 years before inline skates were actually patented.
What the heck?
And it's like, man, and he had so many ideas like that. And it was like, he just never could follow through. He could never like take them all the way to the fruition,
Yeah. I totally relate to that. And so as for people that haven't heard that other podcast, my mom has a million stories like that, whole binders full of a brand that she created to start her own bed and breakfast and kids book pitches and all the stuff that just, never went anywhere. And, for a long time, that was my fuel of like, I just don't want to do that. I want to try. And I would just, just through any way possible, muster up any kind of willpower to get through it. But by the time I'm, like I said, I don't know, 25, 26, all of that stuff just kind of wasn't taking me any further. So I went and talked to my doctor, got a diagnosis of ADHD. I did go on medicine for like 4 or 5 months after that. And the medicine I was on ended up not working for me. And so I haven't been.
What was it? What did you start with?
It's called Strattera.
So that's like a SSRI.
I'm not sure, but I do know that it's different than kind of the typical medicine.
Yeah, my doctor told me that was made originally for depression or some other kind of disorder like that, and then or bipolar, and then they found out that it worked for ADHD. So that didn't work
a little bit. It did, and it ended up making me really irritable, and then the effects were just like weaker a couple months in than initially. And part of the reason why I thought that I was ADHD was, when I was in high school and I was struggling, I was experimenting with drugs, and I had got some Adderall, from a friend, and I'd taken it 2 times, and I remember just thinking like, this doesn't feel like a recreational drug to me. This feels like I just did my homework.
Yeah.
And so I have zero judgment about medication, people's choices on that. I think that there's there's a lot of situations that I could be in where I think that would be the only option for me to survive. But I've kind of what the diagnosis did for me was it gave me language and frameworks, and also a lot of material to use as strategy to offset some of the struggles that I have. And, now, and I've been, over the past 10 years, just slowly but surely implementing as many of those things as I possibly could, including like, I'm not a crazy runner. I don't do marathons or anything, but every other day I run like a 5K, and that is a huge part of my mental health and dopamine and all the whatever, endorphins. And every day I start my day with a hot bath, which actually raises your dopamine. And it's funny because my mom used to do that, but she wasn't aware of like, oh, she's self-medicating. She's like charging up, her dopamine's going up. She's like, and afterwards she's more in control of what she's got. And
wow, it's a hot bath.
A hot bath, yeah.
But also probably like a hot shower with the cold shower, right? That helps too.
Yeah, I don't know about cold, but I know that hot bath or hot shower, especially hot tubs, which eventually I'd like to get a hot tub for this, for conservation purposes. But yeah, it's a huge thing, and I had done it for a long time, less methodically. But now I do it just as part of my routine because it really, really changes my ability to will myself through things that I don't want to do and all that. So anyway, after I got that diagnosis, I think about this a lot. I really encourage people to dive into mental health stuff, go see a therapist, talk to your doctor, do all that stuff. And my favorite quote around that is from Joseph Campbell. And he said that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And the cave you fear to enter is your shadow side. It's the Carl Jung. It's a part of you that you're repressing and suppressing. And for the longest time, up until when I was 25, I just was in denial, really. I just didn't want to face the facts that life is regular tasks are just genuinely harder for me or impossible. And it doesn't matter how. And I thought I could just whip myself into shape and, brute force, willpower, make myself a good person that does the right thing, that follows through. And the truth is that stopped me from so when I go get this diagnosis and I start reading about it and understanding it and start accommodating for it, not only am I seeing improvement on my weaknesses, I'm able to identify my true strengths and lean into those. If you keep who you are in the shadows, not only are your weaknesses hidden from yourself and others, but your strengths are too. And there's so many people that I know that have went and got a diagnosis, and they're devastated by whatever it is. Might be a personality disorder, might be a neurological disorder, whatever it is. But just letting that come to the surface, facing the facts, coming to terms with who you are on a neurobiological level gives you so much raw data and material. And,
there's 20,000 studies now on ADHD.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, think about the data, just the data on who are you, how you can minimize the weakness, maximize the strength, and sublimate this into a superpower, just as you were saying earlier. And my buddy, I have a friend, Meg Lewis. She's a comedian and a designer. She's really funny and ridiculous. She helps people kind of come to terms with who they are and really lean into that. And I had her on my podcast and I asked her, what's your number one tip for people that are wanting to go on this journey to really find themselves? And her biggest piece of advice is start with your faults. And the more I thought
vulnerabilities.
The more I thought about it, the more I thought this is super brilliant, because your brain is obsessed with cataloging everything that anybody ever dissed you about, because we're social animals. And we need to know, back in the day, if the community didn't like you, you got ostracized and you're dead. It's literally do or die if people like you. That's why it feels like do or die when someone says something mean on the internet. And so what happens is anything that's different about you, something's going to happen where they're going to call it out. Now, here's the thing. They're going to call it out in a good way and a bad way, but you're going to remember the bad. You're going to remember the bad. And so if you want to figure out what's different about me, just start with everything that anyone ever told you that you cataloged and decided were reasons to hate yourself for. Start looking at all those things. And it reminds me of one of my favorite books is Wrinkle in Time. Another Meg, the star of that book, the main character, the witch, the good witch that gives her the gift for her final battle. She gives her faults, and she's like, to you, I give your faults. And it's for this reason, because when she goes into battle, the witch knew that when this kid thinks, why would she give me my faults? What are my faults? What's going to come to mind is, oh, I'm really angry, or I'm really impatient. Well, the opposite of impatient is efficient. Anger is often linked to justice. Like if one of the things that someone told me when I was early in my illustration career, I had an art director at a bar. We were hanging out, and someone who had hired me a bunch for jobs. And he made an offhanded comment that I do believe was meant as a slight. And he was like, when I want to fill a page, like fill it, no white space, just fill it, the entire thing. That's when I call you. And what he was saying was like, you have no subtlety. Your stuff is so maximal and decorative, and just all these kind of derogatory comments around what I did for a living. So for the longest time, I just kept that as like, man, my art really lacks subtlety, until I realized like the opposite of subtlety is attention grabbing. Why do you think part of the reason why Apple asked me to use my podcast art in their promotions was because my podcast art grabs people's attention? Do you know how many businesses want attention grabbing art?
Yeah.
That's why I've been able to make a career, right?
Yeah.
And so you start cataloging, you dedicate yourself to going into that cave you fear to enter, going into your shadow side, going into what you perceive as faults, and start coming to terms with those and looking them straight in the eye. You will find your strengths. And I really believe that. That's been my experience. And that's what happened. That's what happened when I finally decided to pull on that thread in my head that had been there since I was in high school of maybe I'm ADHD. The more I pulled on that, man, the more I just became myself, became comfortable with myself, and owned my weaknesses as well as my strengths.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was it like when you were officially diagnosed? Like, can we talk about kind of from that point? Because at that point you were already making artwork, right? Like you were already an illustrator.
Already an illustrator. I was already, I already worked with Sony and Google and all kinds of people.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you were 25 or
Ish,
26.
something like that. Might have been
Yeah.
26. Something in that zone.
And so you found out, which doesn't sound like it was a big surprise, but you found out, and like, can you talk about like the feeling and then like kind of your journey from that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that happened to me, and I think I know this has happened from people hearing me talk about it on the podcast, and they recognize some of the things, and then they go to a doctor and get diagnosed. I had watched a talk online, and this was someone who had it was an artist who had just recently got diagnosed with ADHD, and he
Was it a TED Talk?
It was a Creative Mornings talk.
Do you remember the name of the
artist? I'll try to send you the link. I don't remember. I think he did origami, but I'll find it and I'll send you the link.
Okay.
But he's really speaking. He'd just been diagnosed, and he was really speaking through, like, he was devastated. Like, he was like feeling really defeated and kind of fatalist about, like, this is my lot in life. This is who I am. I can't do anything about it. And he was describing like my previous years of when I didn't have the diagnosis, I'm going to beat this thing about me that is, and I had all this hope that I'd get to the other side of it. But once he was diagnosed, he was like, he felt like defeated. He's like, there is no getting over this. And actually hearing that was the thing that everything he said, I was like, oh God, I have to face the facts. Like, I've been putting this off. I've been putting it in the back of my mind, but I'm almost positive that I have ADHD. But I also thought, I can't believe you feel like that, man. Like, it just sounds like, yeah, get diagnosis, come to terms with reality, start working, forward and try to figure it out. But I actually went through the same process. I think when I actually got the diagnosis, I spent a good couple years, going in the cave you fear to enter. That's the belly of the whale. That's the dark night of the soul. All those terms, they give you a hint. This isn't a fun time. It's not all rosy. You know what I mean? And so, but it doesn't have to be all terrible, but it is real. Coming to terms with your truth and who you are. There's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of stuff you got to come to terms with. There's a lot of, there's hope that you lose. There's grieving. It's a grieving process.
Yeah.
Idea of where things could go.
I had, I think I was prepped for that a little bit. So I had a bit of a different experience. Like I sobered up actually at 20. I was pretty bad into drugs and alcohol at that age. And I joined a community, sobered up. And, so I've had, 16 years to kind of like deal with myself on a spiritual basis or on like a practical basis on how I can like change this and adjust that and take inventory on this and kind of move this around and work on this, so I had kind of like a blueprint for living, so to speak. Yeah. And then when I got diagnosed just recently, it was this year, that to me, it was like a tremendous relief, because I had these prejudices against medication. I had my nieces were medicated and since they were like age 3. So I had all of this kind of like, oh God, this pharmaceutical industry, like they're like screwing these kids and like they're selling these drugs. And so I'm just going to deal with it. I'm going to learn how to deal with it. And I am glad I waited. Maybe not glad I waited so long, but I am glad I waited because I did learn like a lot of tools, like kind of automatically, how to deal with it, like the Post-it note thing and the timer thing and all of that. Yeah. But as soon as I got diagnosed, it was like, and then I started looking into it and learning more, and I started to get more and more hope because it's like, well, shit, man, if I could get this far in life with it, like what can I do if I'm treating it, Yeah.
And I had a very similar experience because by the time I got diagnosed, I'd had probably 7 or 8 years in the same boat of like having a spiritual community. I did mostly sober up. I lived in England, so we drank, but not, I at the time I wasn't drinking heavily at all. So I'd went through that, but I actually think some of the spiritual framework that I had contributed to the grieving because there was an understanding in a lot of spiritual communities that if you practice your religion right, you can attain kind of perfection, or you can attain some kind of holiness, or you can attain whatever, which part of that kind of contributed to this idea of like, oh, I'm just bad and I need to fix myself. And I will be able to fix myself if I do these spiritual practices. And I think at some point that was part of the diagnosis was, it was a revelation, but often a revealing starts with mixed feelings, but you go through a process of grief. And I think that at some point that was healing to me, even though it was painful, of like, these things about me, there's no shutting them off. This is a neurobiological thing. It's not going away. The only thing I can do is deal with it and compensate for it, find coping mechanisms, all that stuff. But that didn't, I didn't go through a huge period of time where I was really grieving, but it did kind of come back over and over of like, when my siblings get mad at me because I don't text them, when I, miss a deadline you don't ever stop feeling terrible about yourself. And then the diagnosis means, and by the way, you're not going to magically just get better at this. You're going to have to slay these dragons. You're going to have to come to terms with it. So I think I spent a few years in that zone. And I think recently, part of it is just being further down the path to where I have the ability to delegate things. I have options. One of the reasons my podcast is so much about career as it is, it's creativity, and it's kind of a creative career, creative practice thing is, in the systems that we're living in today, you might not like it, but time is money. It literally is. It's not a cliche. It's not some platitude. If you have money, you have freedom with your time. And so as an artist, I would be a teacher. I've taught a little bit at art school, and, I've had students be like, why are you so obsessed with money? And I'm like, I wish you knew how little I care about money. I hate money. I hate numbers. I don't like to think about it. No, and the only way you get to not think about money is if you have it. That's the thing. And so I'm not materialistic, nothing like that. I value my time especially because ADHD, I want to be able to do what I like doing with my time. I don't remember how I got on this tangent, but
well, speaking of time, we'll do a short break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about tools for managing an art practice with ADHD, and how juggling a lot of different tasks can cause anxiety and how to deal with that. Hey, thanks for watching Famous When I'm Dead podcast. This episode and all future episodes are going to be available on any one of your favorite podcast apps. I'll also be making all of my interviews from last year available as we move forward. This podcast is free for you to listen to, but it is not free for me to produce. Currently, it's about $140 a month to produce this podcast, and I hope I can keep my video editor. So I want to give a shout out to the patrons, Tom Lambert and Lynn Davis at the $10 level, Chance McGee at the $5 level. You can find him on Instagram at Chance McGee Kunst. Also, Darren Kennedy and Joan Fleming at the $2 level. You can find Darren Kennedy at DK Delicious on Instagram. Love that name. And you can find Joan Fleming on Instagram at Caricatures by Joni Fleming. If you are still listening at this point, chances are that you do get value out of this podcast. If you are able to and you want to show us some love, be sure to pop over to our Patreon page. It's Patreon, patreon.com/famous when I'm dead. The link will be in the description below. Check out our membership tiers. The $10 a month tier even includes 4 live critiques, up to 4 live critiques each month from professional artists that we interview here on this channel. If you're strapped for cash and you still want to show us some love and support, make sure that you share the podcast with friends, family. Maybe you have students that might be interested in hearing the stories of these professional artists. We also have a pretty exciting secret project that we're working on. I won't go into details here, but if you are interested in teaching or becoming a part of a new kind of online art community, be sure to send me an email at samuel@sketcharium.com. So make sure you go to Instagram at famous_when_I'm_dead. and stay up to date on all the new exciting stuff we got going on. Thanks for watching, and be sure to leave us a thumbs up and a comment below. We were just talking about time. One of the quotes that I like is actually a Stoic quote from Seneca. And I'm not even going to try to do the quote, but basically it's that people are so free with their time and so stingy with their money. And it really should be the other way around, because the time is the only thing that's really precious. You will never get that back. But the world is awash in money.
I so agree with that. Time is my number one obsession. I'm so and it really comes from I just value the autonomy of being able to get things done the way that I have to, and then on top of that, being able to spend time doing what is life-giving to me and not soul-crushing. So yeah, I totally relate to that. And you want to speak about some coping mechanisms for
I was just
productivity?
thinking I was thinking maybe we could do like the top 3 things that you use to manage your time and attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, and this is just kind of productivity hacks with ADHD, or if you just struggle with productivity or time management. The first thing that is really, really essential to me is bundling. Have you heard of that before?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So bundling is one of the key tools in the ADHD toolkit. And I figured this out when I was in a non-specific way. Or non-technical way. I figured this out when I was like a teenager, is that I would have all these chores to do. I'd have to mow the lawn. And actually, I hated mowing the lawn so much. It was so boring to me that I would fake injuries to get out of mowing the lawn, like anything. I hated it. And that's until I got into music. And when I got into music, I would just make my little mixtape. I would go out there and mow the lawn. And one of my favorite things, I just have a lot of I'm so proud of. Andy.
Wait a second. Is that bundling?
Yeah, bundling. So bundling. Bundling is taking something you don't want to do and combining it with something you want to do.
Oh, okay. See, I thought you were going to say, I'm going to write that down. I like that. Yeah, I thought you were going to say like getting the stuff, like things that you want to get done, like doing them all one right after the other.
Right. Yeah. That is a different practice, but also helpful for certain types. But yeah, bundling is, and the thing is that this is really the key for me. Like getting obsessed with music and then later podcasts. Podcasts are my secret weapon for doing stuff that I don't want to do. If I have to do something I don't want to do and I can't listen to a podcast, I really freak out. I have to figure out some crazy other way around it. But that gets me through the 99% of it. And I have
But
so
how do
much.
you do that when you have a podcast and you're doing something and it's like a bunch of good information? You're like, oh, I can't forget that. And you got to write it down.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll just take a note in my phone, or I'll save if I'm like, oh, I need to set this aside and do this another time. But most of the time, I'm talking about like washing dishes. You know what I mean? Washing dishes, listening to podcasts, cleaning up the house, whatever, listening to podcasts. So bundling has helped me a lot. And I think one of the things that I would just suggest on this is I'll tell you just a quick story. I don't know how much time we have, but I was moving everything out of my bottom floor because I had some contractors that were gonna redo my hardwood floors. And I talked to my contractor and he's like, oh, you need to move your fridge out of here. And I was like, okay. He's like, if you have the right kind of dolly, you can move a fridge by yourself. It's not actually a huge deal. It seems like crazy, but once you get it strapped up, it'll be totally fine. And so I got a dolly, I strapped it up, and I started to move my fridge, and I panicked because I was like, this thing is insanely heavy. Like I'm afraid that as I'm moving it out my front steps, it's going to fall on me and I'm going to die. This is so intense. But because he acted like I should be fine, I thought I'm just going to power through it. Because it's just embarrassing to be like, can you help me with that thing you said I should have been able to take care of? And so I moved it out. Felt super dangerous. It was horrible. And I moved it out to my neighbor's garage. And then when they'd finished the floor, I just got over my pride and I was like, can you help me move my fridge back in? I had a lot of trouble with that. So him and his one of his employees moved it back, both like twice the size of me. After they moved it back, he was like, by the way, I've moved thousands of fridges. Yours is by far the heaviest fridge I've ever moved. You shouldn't have moved that by yourself. And, when he said that, I was just struck by how much of a badass I was. Super huge fridge. But the takeaway of that is you have to trust yourself and know when your fridge is heavier than others. You know what I mean? You have to trust that thing that says, this thing that I'm carrying, everybody else seems to be able to do it fine, but for some reason it's heavier. And you don't know what other people, a lot of other people, they got trust funds in their fridge. Makes it real easy to move things around. You got huge stacks of cash. You don't know what other people got going on in the fridge or how light or heavy they are. If yours is about to crush you, you need to ask for help, right?
Did you have a bunch of food and stuff in there?
No, it was empty. I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't know why it's so freakishly heavy. I never got to the bottom of that.
Was that number 2? Trust your instinct?
Yeah, well, let's call it number 2. But looking back, one of the ways that I think I did trust my fridge, and the weight of my fridge was when I was mowing the lawn. It wasn't enough for me to just listen to music. I had to sing. And so I would be mowing the lawn as like a 15-year-old. And I did this all the way until I started listening to podcasts, which was like when I was like 22. And I would just like mow the lawn and sing at the top of my lungs. And I just have so much like love for that past Andy who was like, you know what, guys, this is how I have to do it. I have to mow the yard. And the only way I can do it is when I go out here and sing at the top of my lungs, Boys to Men. And I'm, whatever. And all of my neighbors, I definitely had neighbors give me flack for it. Like, oh God, he's mowing his lawn again. But that's the kind of thing when I say like, trust the heaviness of your fridge, that's the kind of thing I mean. It's like, yeah, most people shouldn't have to sing at the top. It's not sustainable for every person in the world to take a bath every day. It's not sustainable. But my fridge is heavier in that way.
Yeah. I have a diverted question or like a side road question. Do you pack, this actually is kind of part of the next question, I guess, but do you like pack too much stuff into your schedule?
Oh yeah. Well, what's great? That's my number 3. We're going to talk about schedule. So I'm actually working on releasing it's a super basic thing. I'm going to call it the super simple pocket planner. And here's why, because I've had I'm sure a lot of ADHD people have, they're good at coming up with systems. You can come up with a damn good system. Following the system is a whole other thing. It's very difficult to follow through on a system, right? So I found that the more simple I can make that system, the more likely I will use it. And so for me, I've seen people that are as busy as me and they've got these huge planners with every single thing marked down and all this time management. And I've heard, I've listened to all the time management podcasts of have this system, that system, blah, 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 all these systems. And when I have the weight of that management, I'm going to do nothing. That's just what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so what I do is on Sunday, I just do the most simple thing in the world. So I put all my events in like Google Calendar. So I have those in there. Like I have to be on this podcast at this time. I have that. But I don't put all my deadlines or all that stuff in there. What I do is every Sunday night or Monday morning, I get out my notes app and I have a little note that has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I plug in every event that I have. I plug in my deadlines. I mark out the space of this is the hours I need to be doing that. That's my planner. That's all I do. That's how I know that I'm doing the thing I need to be doing when I'm doing it. But it's not some extensive, crazy monthly calendar. It's a weekly thing. Mm-hmm. That process it works like a charm for me.
Yeah. And then for the things that are further out, you have a month calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep. And
I've been
so,
doing that with a buddy of mine here. He's also a caricature artist living, Chance McGee.
okay.
Shout out to Chance McGee
What's up,
Coon.
champs?
And so anyway, yeah, we're doing like accountability thing. So we send each other a list of 7 items every week, how long they're going to take, what time of day they would be best done on. So morning, afternoon, or evening.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then we have like a very business, like we keep it to 10 minutes call at the end of the week and just review like what we learned about that. And we've just been doing it. This is the 3rd week now, but it's super helpful to have a buddy to do that with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the truth is, most of the time when I do my schedule, that little notes app, I have it shared with my wife and my manager, my agent, so that they know what I'm doing throughout the week. But that is another form of accountability of like this. And so, if I don't send them the schedule that week, they're like, "Where's the schedule? What are you doing? I don't know
Oh, nice, nice.
what's up." And so that's extremely helpful. There's something about also just the piece of when I do that, I know I don't have to ask myself, what should I be doing right now? I just look at it and I'm like, this is what I have to accomplish
Yeah.
on Tuesday at noon. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
And
it's a stress reliever too.
it really
Have you
is.
ever used Priority Matrix?
I haven't. What is that?
No? Oh,
No.
really? Okay, so it's a grid. It's 4 spots, and it's basically urgent and important, urgent, not important, not
Yeah.
important, urgent,
Seen that
like
before.
that. Yeah.
But
When
yeah, so my number 3, just to highlight it,
yeah.
is when it comes to productivity systems, keep it super simple. Doesn't matter what app you use, doesn't matter. For me, apps even, it's too much for me. Just a list with the week. And I'm actually going to turn it into a pocket planner with just the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There, you can just really basics.
Nice.
If you can just keep that in routine, that's a game changer for me.
Okay. So how much time do you have?
I could probably stay on here for another 15 minutes.
Okay, so let me ask you then about the co-loop.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that.
talk about it. Yeah, I love talking about this, and I'll tell you why. Because so Coloop, for people that don't know, I co-founded a artist management agency with my agent, and it's called Coloop. And we have a roster of artists. We also are going to dip our toes into some other waters that where we're artists in different respects that we haven't kind of publicly announced. But the idea for this for me is I think I've started to realize that I have 3 phases to the side of my practice that is helping creative people. So, funnily enough, when I was living in England, when I graduated college, I had some lucky breaks right out the gate. I had some cool illustration jobs fall into my lap, more or less. But then the recession hit. Okay. So, but while I was kind of like, it was working, I thought I want to go back to the States and I want to help creative people, help my friends figure out how to get jobs like this. I want to help them figure out how to get the ball rolling because it was working for me. When I moved back to the States, the recession hit and all of my jobs dried up. And so that plan to help creative people just went out the door because I needed to help myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent 6 years just building my career before I really thought about helping anybody else because I had to work from that low point. And I more or less forgot that the catalyst for moving back to the US was to help creative people because I totally let go of it. And then after I got my career into a place where it was really working and I was starting to thrive, that's when I started the podcast and I kind of picked that back up. Okay. So that became Creative Pep-Talk, the podcast. The way that I've seen as I went, so the podcast is really about empowering individuals to empower themselves. It's about don't wait to be picked. Don't wait for the gatekeeper to say yes. You've got to figure out how do you make this strategically work without just being the chosen one and it all be handed to you on a silver platter. So it's all about here's all the ideas to empower yourself as an individual. And that will take you really far. But as I've been doing the podcast 6 years, and I've been doing my journey for 12 years. I've realized that will take you really far, but you will hit a ceiling where you can't go any further alone. And that the only way to break out into the next level is to go together.
Oh man,
you have to have, what are we going to say?
You're speaking my language. Yep.
Dude, it's true, man. It's so true. And so the artist management thing is just kind of phase 2 of helping creative people. I want to create an entity that serves the people that I believe in, that, we only represent 7 artists, including me right now, but these are people I believe in, and I want to group together, share resources, and help each other thrive in ways that we can't alone. Now, I will say,
so
this
we
is just
gotta,
kind of,
we should talk after the podcast, because I got a super secret project going on, and But let me clarify for the listeners about that. So you guys are working together, sharing resources, or is there some particular exercise that you're doing, or?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, technically, it's working as an artist management agency. So my agent reps all 7 of these people on project to project stuff, like on all of their illustration stuff, their design stuff, all that kind of stuff. So he's acting as a rep in that way. But on top of that, we also have monthly meetings where we're doing a Zoom call and sharing what we're going through, and people are sharing what they've learned, and they're giving each other contacts. And, it's all about, like, our thing we say all the time is a rising tide raises all ships. Mm-hmm. So we all have this abundant mindset of, if I help you, it's good for me, it's good for Coloop, it's good for the industry. And so that's kind of the intentional, it's much more collaborative than I've seen other agencies be. I think there's a collective vibe to it as well. And so that's kind of the ethos behind that. But I will just say, if I live long enough, I foresee a phase 3 to this plan. So you got empowering individuals going together. Phase 3 is really changing the system. And I don't know, when I started, I would have never foreseen being able to work with my agent, Ryan, and knowing how to actually make an agency work. I couldn't imagine being able to do that. I just kind of kept pushing forward. I have no idea how I could ever influence the system. I have no idea. I can't imagine it. I don't see it happening even, but I know that even if you're empowered, even if you're going together, that eventually the next ceiling is the system is just broken. The system just doesn't work. The tax law, everything in the system is set up for, at least in America, for these little guys to not thrive. And so I would really, whether it's taxes, mainly taxes and healthcare, those 2 areas in America especially are so opposing of creativity, small business, all that kind of stuff. And so eventually, if I live long enough and have enough resources, I'd like to just be a little part of that changing.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I can't wait to talk to you a little bit. Let's try to conserve some time so we can chat for a minute after.
Sure.
But yeah, I also would love to have you back on another time, because there's a lot of things that I had to skip that I want to get a little bit deeper into. But so let's end with 10 rapid fire questions.
Fantastic.
Ready?
Yes.
Stand up or skit comedy? I know you got the lay down tragedy, but stand up or skit comedy?
I have to say stand up. I would have said skit when I was growing up. I was much more of like Saturday Night Live and improv stuff, but I'm so in love with stand up. I have to go there.
Yeah, it's an art form for sure. Okay, your very last meal.
I know I call myself Andy J Pizza, and I do genuinely love pizza, but I think it's going to have to be ramen, and it has to be from a place called Urban Ramen in LA. It is my obsession.
That's a huge plug, man. That's a huge plug.
Dude, it's so good.
Are they sponsoring you, or?
No, dude, they have like lo-fi hip hop playing, and they have like Studio Ghibli movies like playing on the screens, and they have this spicy miso ramen. It's just, I don't even know. I don't know. I've never had anything like it, but I love ramen in general, but this place, woo, Woo! It's so good. Obsessed.
Okay. And what book are you reading now, or what show are you watching now?
Okay. I'm gonna answer both because they're super quick. We just finished Queen's Gambit, which I really enjoyed. And I'm reading what's it called? Story. I have to look it up. It's okay. It's by Babette Buster, and
Babette Buster?
I guess that's her name. And it's called, I just finished this like a day ago, and it's Do Story, How to Tell Your Story So the World Listens. Such a good book. It's a short book about storytelling. If you're doing any public speaking, anything, check out that book. It was delicious.
So the world listens, okay. And favorite new band or musician?
I would say new is a relative term. So I will say the person that I'm probably like have been over the past 5 years, been just like, man, yeah, is he used to go by Sandy Alex G. Now he's just Alex G again. I guess he used to be Alex G too. Alex G. So it's so good. It's kind of like I heard it described as Elliott Smith meets Built to Spill. It's got a lot of like really great songwriting right next to like really experimental, noisy stuff, but huge fan, Alex G. Huge fan.
Okay. And what artist should listeners have a look at right now, aside from Andy J. Pizza?
It's a good question. Is this modern or
So many, like living artists.
living? Oh gosh, man, that's a good question. Are we talking? We're talking visual art.
Yeah, visual art. Yeah.
You know, I'm a huge fan of Christian Robinson. Do you know him?
No.
He's a kids book illustrator. He worked at Pixar. He makes a lot of like collagey stuff. That's the person that's coming to mind. I feel like his simplicity is sophisticated in a way that I don't see other kind of abstracted illustrators working. I feel like he's always commanding. He always puts a little something in that paper cut that shows that he has a great understanding of anatomy and color in ways that I don't see with other people. And
Nice.
he's fantastic.
You know what I just realized? You have a voice mixture of Steve-O and Louis Anderson.
Oh my God. That's amazing. Dude, I love Louis Anderson. Oh my God. Do you know, have you ever heard him on a podcast?
No.
I bet they're both Midwesterners. There's something about that nasally Midwestern thing.
Yeah,
I just cannot escape. But Louis Anderson, go listen to every podcast interview he's ever done. He's the sweetest person. Like everyone, he ends up crying because he's so moved by his love for a family member or a friend or something someone said. And oh man, I love him. He's so good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I realize now that I need to make these questions one or the other, but let's power through here.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. What is the worst trouble you've been in?
All right. The worst trouble I've been in was I got pulled out of ceramics class in high school by my mom and my stepmom. And she took me to the car and I was like, what's going on? It's like someone died. What the heck is going on? And she's like, we're going to the police station. They want to question you. If it's about this weekend, if I learn anything about this weekend from them that you don't tell me, you're basically grounded forever. And so I spilled my guts because that weekend we'd actually went camping on private property and had been smoking and drinking and all this stuff. So I spilled my guts only to find out that I get into this interrogation room with a cop, and he's asking me about this arson that ended up actually being another person named Andrew Miller in the same high school that was in band. And so I gave all of my freaking secrets away to my mom for nothing. But I was in huge trouble. They took my car away. It was bad.
If you had $1 billion, what would you do with it?
Whoa.
These questions are too big.
They're big questions, but I'll try to answer them fast.
Yeah.
I'd probably fund creative things. I would probably give it to creative people that I know, at least part of it, to creative people I know who are brilliant, who haven't been picked by people with huge bankrolls.
Who are going to change the world, who are going to be game changers. Yep.
Yeah, the people that need to be bet on, that should be bet on, that aren't.
What book would you bring if you were trapped on an island? A Wrinkle in Time?
Probably The Little Prince.
The Little Prince, okay.
Yeah.
And one nugget of wisdom for young artists. We're going to skip that one. We gave a bunch of good nuggets.
Right, yeah.
And 1 week to live. How would you spend 1 week?
I would probably spend a portion of it podcasting, just like emptying myself.
Yeah, because you're giving back.
Tape. And then the other half I would just spend with my wife and kids, just soaking up every second. That's definitely what I'd be doing.
Any last thing you want to plug?
Best place to find me is on Instagram at Andy J Pizza or at my podcast, Creative Pep-Talk.
Cool. Andy J Pizza, everyone. Thanks
Thank
for
you very
tuning
much for having me, man. I had a good time.